Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. So today's conversation is going to introduce us to the Barber of Seville, which is opening here in Pittsburgh this coming Saturday, October the 14th, with a dear friend of mine, Samuele Bozzolla, who has been also on the program a couple of times before, and you have thoroughly enjoyed his stories about the operas and his upbringing in a family where opera was indeed a strong tradition. And in addition to some curiosities about Pavarotti that probably none of us knew about before. But before bringing Samuele to the program, a little pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Samuele, bentornato al programma. Come stai? How are you?
Grazie. I'm doing well, thank you. Very well, thank you.
It's always a pleasure for both me and the listeners to have you on because you have been our guide, so to speak, through the world of opera to some of the operas that we have chit-chatted about before. And the Pittsburgh Opera is opening up the Barber of Seville. So we couldn't have a better guest than yourself to guide us through some of the curiosities and also give a light on the libretto and the characters, because not always operas are that easy, straightforward. And also some of the musical moments that we should be paying attention while enjoying the performance. But before we get to talk about the Barber of Seville, would you like to share something about yourself to the audience, or to whoever is meeting you, so to speak, for the first time?
Sure. Earlier you said that opera was a big tradition in my family. Well, I think it was the only tradition.
Well, I know about also the little tortellini making with your family, but that was more a culinary tradition. But I know professionally this was it's in your DNA.
I was born in a very musical family. I think my mother's background, her father was the famous Italian bass Ezio Pinza, who sang at the Met for 25 years. And then after that, I went on Broadway and was the original Emile de Becque in South Pacific, where he won a Tony for the best performer in 1947. And then finally went to Hollywood and did a series of movies with Janet Leigh was one of his co-stars. And so he had a stellar career. My mother also, but my mother was more in with teaching. She had a school in Italy for 30 years. She had an opera radio program here in Pittsburgh called Opera with Claudia. So I think I saw my first opera when I was 5 years old, and I've seen many ever since. And as you said, the family was very close to Luciano Pavarotti, so or I should say Maestro Pavarotti, and so I interacted with him both on as a friend, and also I don't know how many times I saw him singing, probably at least 15, 20 times in the years that in his career. And it was always a pleasure to hear him sing, because he was a true artist. And I think just like my grandfather was a true artist. And I think that in today's world is sometimes missing. I think that artistry is a little bit missing. I remember my mother would say to me later in her life, she said, Samuele, because my first name is Samuele, she said, opera is not an art form anymore, but it's a business. So things have changed. And I think what she meant was that one day you're singing in LA, 2 days later in San Francisco, then you're going to New York, you're singing Barber of Seville one day, then you're singing Traviata the next day, and so forth and so on. So it's more chaotic. And again, my grandfather pretty much for 25 years sang at the Met. That's the only place he sang. So So
yes, things have definitely changed quite a bit, and it must have been, sometimes very fascinating on your end to growing up and being exposed to this kind of world and culture, but also maybe sad on your mother's side to come to that realization.
yeah, exactly. So yeah.
So today we're going to talk about an opera buffa, Il Barbiere di Siviglia, by Gioacchino Rossini. I would like to ask you to maybe give us some background information about this opera, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the Barber of Seville, as we call it in Italiano, is the Barbiere di Siviglia, is probably the greatest, or one of the top 3 greatest comic operas that was ever written in opera. It's a style of bel canto, which means there's a lot of singing that is very expressionist, and it's also a lot of thrilling in the singing. It goes up and down on the musical scale. That's usually what bel canto was referred to. And the opera was taken from a book that was written in the 1770s by the French Pierre Beaumarchais, who also wrote The Marriage of Figaro, Le Nozze di Figaro. Now, strangely enough, Le Nozze di Figaro is a prequel, meaning the action happened before, I'm sorry, prequel. It was after. The Rossini opera was before, but The Marriage of Figaro was after. But The Marriage of Figaro, Mozart wrote it 30 years later. So, yes, so that was interesting how that came about. So, the opera by Rossini is a bit confusing because there's a lot of things happening, and it's unusual because usually operas are straightforward, La Bohème, Traviata, what's where and what. In the Rossini Barber of Seville, of course, it's because it's taken from a book. There's a lot of characters, and there's somewhat confusing as we'll look when we look at the story. So that kind of is, I think people sometimes when they go to the opera and they see the Rossini Barber, if they don't know beforehand, it can be a little bit confusing, just as The Marriage of Figaro can be confusing as well.
That's why we have you today to to spanare questo, to kind of shed some light. Now, I have a trivia question for you. Do you know by chance when and where the opera was first premiered?
Yeah, it premiered in 1816 at the Teatro Argentina in Rome, Rome, Italy. And again, it was premiered in 1816, again, being the pre-equal to The Marriage of Figaro. And The Marriage of Figaro premiered in the 1700s because Mozart was a predecessor of Rossini. So that opera was done before this one, even though this one is really the story before The Marriage of Figaro. This came afterwards.
And the librettist that we have to thank for the opera.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The librettist.
Oh, Sterbini was it. He was not he's not a great name as far as librettists like the ones we had for Puccini or Verdi, but for his time he did some other operas, but this was probably his best opera. And again, for those of you who might have a question on what a librettist is, he writes the words. And a lot of people think that that's just, an easy thing, you write the words, but it's probably harder than writing the music because the word have to go with the music. So in other words, the two have to combine with each other. And throughout opera history, there's been a lot of, if you read about the operas, again, Puccini was always fighting with Gianluca Iacocca as a librettist, especially like Bohème, because they could never get together on what they wanted to say. One would say one thing and the other say, no, it's not what I want, and go back and forth. As a matter of fact, sometimes they couldn't even stay in the same room. So the libretto is very, very important because he has to put words to the music that the composer is writing. And if those words are kind of then it doesn't have as the feeling, the meaning that it should. Mm-hmm. So, and the opera is 2 acts, and it's around 2.5 hours. Plus, usually it's 1 intermission because it's 2 acts, so there's an intermission in between. So, depending on where the performance is, it could be 3 hours, depending on how long the intermission is. So,
So if we look at Rossini, he was quite a proliferous composer, right? Would you agree on that?
Oh, yes. He completed roughly 2 operas every year for 19 consecutive years.
Wow.
Yes, he was a machine on doing opera. And, of course, when you write so many operas, just like Handel and Mozart and Beethoven, when you write so much music, some of them is better known than others. So in Rossini's case, Barber of Seville is probably the best known. Then you have William Tell with the famous William Tell overture. Guglielmo Tell, that was another opera. But again, his opera was this one, and because there is a lot of ups and downs in the music, pianissimo to fortissimo, his nickname was Signor or Mr. Crescendo, because the music would grow and then go down, grow and down. So that was something that was not really at that time in that period. That was kind of something new. And there's nothing written in stone on this, but most musicologists think that he composed the opera in 3 weeks.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
Yes, to write that. I mean, if anybody out there is a musician and has written music, you know how hard it is to write music. Not only to write it, but then you have to orchestrate it, put it to the orchestra. So yeah.
Let's go back to that one premiere in Rome that you mentioned before. How was the opera perceived then?
It was a total fiasco, disaster. Yeah.
Wow.
Hissing, booing, and nothing worked. Now, I have to say that there was a other composer who composed the same opera. His name was Paisiello. He was a rival of Rossini. So I think at that performance, he had a lot of people going and purposely boo the opera. So then again, interesting enough, like a lot of the operas are, the second performance was completely different and it received high success and critical acclaim. But again, on the 20th of February, with the premiere, was one of the worst fiascos ever.
Wow.
It was it's interesting enough that people, and not to digress, but La Bohème, which is probably the most performed greatest opera, that was a fiasco too when it first performed. So it's not unusual that sometimes this happens. Now, in this case, I think it was mainly because Paisiello, the other gentleman, the other composer who wrote another Barber of Seville, was infiltrated a lot of people. In Italian, we call them clac, to boo and to hiss and so forth and so on. So.
I know that you have also collected some other funny anecdotes or interesting coincidences that happened. Can you share a couple of those with us?
Yeah. So first of all, back in those days, the composer a lot of time conducted the opera, which is interesting because now that doesn't happen anymore. Of course, that kind of stopped after the Rossini, because once Puccini, Verdi, they didn't conduct her up, but he came on and conducted, and he came out, and the whole theater kind of broke out in laughter because he had a very strange suit. It was kind of a brown, dark color. And it was, for some reason, again, he was ridiculed in the worst possible way. Then when the tenor at the time, the tenor was Manuel Garcia, there's a scene where he's playing the guitar, and on stage, the guitar strings snapped. So, and because they snapped, he kind of couldn't find the right notes at that time. So when you're trying to play the guitar and sing, it's kind of hard if you don't have the notes to accompany you as a singer. So that was, again, not good. Don Basilio comes in, and again, we'll look at the characters in a minute. And when he first entered, he fell on stage and broke his nose. So he continued to perform. He continued to perform, of course, but blood was everywhere on him, on the clothes, on the stage, on other singers that were there. So again, and then in the second act, a black cat walked all over the stage. So again, that's not a good
Any
thing.
superstition there? Because I
Oh,
know that in Italy, usually if there's a black cat, you wait for someone else to go first.
yeah. Most opera singers are very superstitious. My mother uh, would not sing. She had a recital. She went on stage, and in the first row there was a woman wearing a purple dress. Wow, she would not sing because that to singers is bad luck. So they had her removed from the first row so she wouldn't see her.
I'll
So
keep in mind when I choose my outfit for when we're going to go there. Never wear purple.
right.
I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite interesting. Well, this opera is also used quite a bit also in pop culture. Are there some other places or
Well, I mean,
associations that we would make with this opera?
yeah, the two most famous pieces that are used in, if you want to say pop culture in today's world, or even 20, 30 years ago, first is the overture, of course, and then the aria that the bass sings, that the figure sings, largo factotum. That's also used in commercials and some in movies. But again, the other thing I guess that most people know is the Bugs Bunny that they used. The Bugs Bunny. It was I think it was called the Bunny of Seville or something like that. So.
Okay. Well, let's get to some recognitions of Rossini before we get to go into the characters. I think he got also some recognitions in France.
Oh yeah. He became the royal composer and inspector general of singing in France in 1822.
Okay.
So
And,
that was fairly a big title for him at that time. So that was pretty phenomenal for him to be recognized in that sense. So and then
he stopped
he was,
very, I mean, fairly young. I mean, 37 at that time. Maybe it was not as young as 37 is here, but it was still in young age.
Oh yeah. I mean, at 37 is pretty young. I mean, even Beethoven congratulated him, and that was not an easy feat because Beethoven was a tough critic on everything. But yeah, and then interesting enough, Rossini stopped composing when he was 37, which is unheard of in the world of the music. Whether it be symphonic or operatic. So and.
So in order to break down, I'm actually going to, because we have quite a few characters, okay, that you're going to consult about, but I'm going to also have them up on the screen so that, anyone watching this interview can kind of make a memory, a photographic memory of who is who. Then we'll go to some music.
Okay. Now, before we do that, I just want to go back to the overture a second. The overture was not composed for this opera. He took the overture from another opera he wrote earlier, which is interesting. That's unusual for a composer to do that. But for whatever reason, he felt that opera's overture was best suited for the Barber of Seville, and that's why he used it. Because again, a lot of overtures is the overture, meaning the beginning of the opera. Some of them have music from the opera, but most of them do not. Most of them are separate pieces altogether. As a matter of fact, you can buy CDs or vinyl or whatever that have the greatest overtures, in operatic history. And so, but you'll see that a lot of them are not related to what the music in the actual opera is. And again, this one, very famous, the Marriage of Figures overture is very famous. Do not have any music that is then repeated in the opera, interesting enough. So anyway, okay, the main character. So we have Rosina. She's a mezzo soprano. She's young, beautiful, and intelligent, and she lives with Dr. Bartolo, who's her tutor, but they're not related to each other. Then you have the Count Almaviva. He's a light tenor. So in other words, when we say a light tenor, a tenor that would sing an opera, he's really should be called a Rossinian tenor. In other words, he can't really do bohème. he can't sing Puccini, he can't sing Verdi too much because it's too demanding, too heavy as a tenor. So a Rossinian tenor really pretty much sings a Rossini and maybe some Donizetti.
Mm-hmm.
And he's young, wealthy nobleman, and of course he's in love with Rosina.
Mm-hmm.
Barto, a bass, is old and a doctor, quite kind of a grump. He tutors Rosina, and he actually wants to marry her because she's very rich. So he's looking at the money.
Mm-hmm.
Figaro, the baritone, is the Barber of Seville and the factotum, the guy who knows everybody. He can fix anything. So he is, just like in the Marriage of Figaro, he's kind of the main character in the opera. Basilio is a bass, and he's a teacher, a singing teacher, I should say, and he's also a priest and a friend of Dr. Bartolo. But again, he's really a friend to anyone who can provide him some kind of benefit. So he kind of just does whatever. If you say to him, hey, come over here tonight, he'll say yes. And then somebody has a better offer. Say, no, I can't. I got to go here instead. Sorry. So he kind of
he's only loyal to himself.
Loyal to himself is that, or money, or things like that. Then we have two minor characters: Berta, who's the housekeeper for Dr. Bartolo, and Fiorello, who's Almaviva, the count's servant. There's always a servant for a count. So those are the characters of the opera. Now, as I said before, it's a little bit confusing, and some people might say, well, there's not that many characters. It's true, but the confusion comes in is because the count is disguised twice in two different characters that are not supposed to be the count. That's where the confusion lies a little bit. So.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the overture. Tell us a little bit about what we would be listening, and also tell us how long we will be listening.
Well, we'll listen to each of the pieces today. We'll just listen to a little bit, maybe a minute and a half. Some of them are longer than others. The overtures, well, I mean, I think that even if you're not an opera lover, have never seen an opera, and even know how to spell opera, this overture will be something that you recognize, again, because of Bugs Bunny and because it's been used in commercial. It's just a very famous piece of music. So there's, again, you don't never have to been at an opera or no opera to have heard this overture.
Okay, let's do it. Andiamo, ascoltiamo. Okay, now we have to obviously invite our audience to go and see it. This was just to get them così, just a little teaser, a little introduction. So let's, I guess, I'm gonna go.
I was say if in there you hear the crescendos, how it goes down and then comes up. Da 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 da. So a lot of the opera, a lot of the music, you'll hear that type of musical style, pizzicato and crescendo, we call it in the musical world. How and Rossini was a master. That's why they called him Mr. Crescendo.
So now we are in scene 1.
Right. Scene 1 is
Marco's house.
Right. Exactly. And we have Fiorello, who's the servant to Almaviva. He arranges for a bunch of off-tune musicians for a serenade to Rosina at dawn. And the Count sings Ecco ridente in cielo, which means there, laughing in the sky, the beautiful dawn appears. And he's trying to, tell her and show her his love that he has for her. And of course, at this point, early on in the opera, she's kind of, doesn't really know why he's he's doing this, and so she's a little bit, and it has no effect on her at the moment. So to him, after singing this, he kind of says, "Oh well, not what I wanted to do." So it was kind of a bad start to the day. So if you want to play a little bit now. Notice the tenor the voice is going to be very light, meaning it's not a Pavarotti sound, it's not a Domingo sound. So,
and also tell me when to stop, okay? So let's give a listen.
Okay, so there is your typical bel canto. That is bel canto. The appoggiatura, which means the placing of the voice. It goes up a little bit and it comes back a little bit down. That's your typical bel canto. And again, the tenor's voice is light here. So it's very, very pleasing to listen to. And that 25-30 second introduction that Rossini put on this aria is, it's very sweet, and you hear the guitar, and it gives you that sense that dawn is coming up. So once that aria is over, and there's a hustle and bustle on the stage, and then in the background we hear one of the most famous, I guess, la 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 la, which is one of the most famous introductions to the aria largo factotum. And again, great aria for the baritone. It's probably always done if a baritone is doing a recital, he puts this on his list of arias, because again, It's a great aria. It's it's not easy to sing, but it's very, very pointed and very strong. And you have to have a voice, and you have to really believe in what you're singing in this aria. Mm-hmm. And the aria really talks about how he's ready to do everything night and day, and he's always present, he's always on the run, because the factato means someone who does everything. Mm-hmm. Figaro qui, figaro lì, figaro giù, figaro su. It's a figaro here. Come here, Figaro. I'll go over there, Figaro. I'll come over here, Figaro. And so he goes and solves love problems, money issues. He has revenge. If you want revenge, he'll do that too for you, and all those things. Because at the time in Italy, or even in Europe, a barber was not only a person that cuts your hair and shaved you, but he also did. They used to, if you had high blood pressure, they would take leeches and put them on.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, put leeches on your arms and suck out that blood. So that was another thing that the barbers did. So again, it showed you all the things that they did. And Rossini took the idea from that.
Okay. So, yeah. So we're gonna listen to another piece. Is that where we're gonna go into?
Yes. Largo Autumn.
And here we are.
Dalla città largo, la 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 la, presto bottega calveggia, presto, la 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 la. Oh, che bel vivere, che bel piacere, per un barbiere di qualità, di qualità. Bravo, bravissimo, bravo. La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità, bravo. La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità. Fortunatissimo per verità. La 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 la. Fa tutto la notte e il giorno, sempre d'intorno in giro sta. Miglior cuccagna per un barbiere, vita più nobile non si dà. La 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 la.
Okay, who doesn't recognize this?
Oh, the difficult part about this aria, and it's not easy to sing. It's really not easy to sing. It's the fraseggio, the phrasing. If you don't get the fraseggio, you can't sing this aria. I'm sorry. And a lot of baritones just don't have that capability, or because you're singing it so quickly with the music that sometimes your words don't come out as well. And the diction is important because in order for the aria to be successful, the audience has to hear what you're saying. And that fraseggio is very difficult to keep up. So you have to really have a good operatic training, not only as far as the voice going back and forth in the notes, but also with the diction. And so it's a difficult aria to perform well. I mean, I've heard it many times performed badly. But to perform it well, it's not easy because again, it has that both. It makes you, you have to be a good singer because going back and forth, you have to have the breath. The breath is very important. If you don't have the breath, you're going to run out of breath. And if you run out of breath, then that's not a good thing because then you can't, the voice doesn't come out. Plus, the fraseggio, the phrasing is very, and you have to really make it so otherwise people can't hear what you're saying, and they kind of you lose the aria loses a little bit, and that's when I sing badly. I've heard people saying that either run out of breath and they go like this, and that's no good, or they run out of breath and so the words are kind of mushed together. Doesn't come out as well. So,
and I can just somehow picture your mom to be very precise and also expectation. One more time, let's do it again.
My mother was very precise, and I don't know how many times I would hear her in a music room here in the house rehearsing with the baritones that she had in this aria, because it's an aria that takes a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, and how not only to sing it but how to breathe and not lose that power in your voice. So. But when the aria is over, Figaro then learns about the troubles that the Count is having, trying to meet up with Rosina, and so he's willing to help him, of course, for money. And while this is going on, Rosina comes out on the balcony and purposely drops a piece of paper where it then is retrieved by the Count, and then the Count reads it, and Rosina says, "I need to know what your intentions are, because if not, Dr. Bartolo is going to marry me." But now he's not home. So what are we going to do about this thing? Are you going to try to steal me from Bartolo, or are you going to take me away? What are your intentions? So as the act continues, when Bartolo leaves, he says, he just slips and says he intends to marry her today. So all of a sudden, Count Alameda says, "Oh my, this is an urgent situation, because all of a sudden now I don't have that much time, because I don't want to lose Rosina to Bartolo, because Bartolo, of course, is interested in her money." So that comes another aria, and it's a second serenade. It's called "Se il mio nome saper voi bramate," meaning if your name you would like to be, bramate, it means in love with or being infatuated with. And then Rosina answers from inside the house, and then the two come out and sing a duet, "All'idea di quel metallo." So, but we're just going to hear "Il Se il mio nome saper voi bramate" from, and this is again the light tenor aria from Count Almaviva. And in this case, we're going to hear Ramon Vargas, a South American famous tenor of the probably 1990s, early 2000s. Okay. And you hear here the balance of the voice, how he has to, go up and then come back down, go up and come back down. But it's a light voice. Again, if we take Pavarotti as another tenor, Pavarotti doesn't sing Rossini. I mean, he might do Otello, because Otello is a heavier opera. But this type of, like the Barber, he will not do, because it's just too light for him. It's not, just like some Rossinian tenors, again, will now be able to sing Traviata and so forth. There's a few that can. There's a few that have done both. Juan Diego Flores in today's world has done both Traviata and the Barber. So there are some that can do it, but for the most part, there's two different voices altogether. And there's a little more of what I guess we can call vocal gymnastics in the Rossini or the Barber of Seville versus, let's say, in Bohème or Traviata and so forth and so on. So now the opera keeps going in this first act, and now it's the first time really that we hear the Rosina sing, and she has the wonderful Una voce poco fa. She sings about her love for Lindoro, who she actually never met. Now, Lindoro is Count Almaviva. But they name is Lindoro because if he was a count back then, and you can't touch a count, so he has to disguise himself. So they just give him the name of Lindoro. So that's really only, and she only knows him by voice. So she writes him a message. And so Una voce poco fa is probably, again, I don't know, one of the most famous operatic arias that there has been written, and that again it's in recitals it was always done, and we hear, in this case, we hear the infamous, I don't know how other adjectives we can describe, of the great diva Maria Callas, who was probably one of the greatest opera singers that ever existed, is in the mezzo soprano roles. So go ahead. Okay.
Almost feel like a crime to stop the recording for all these performers.
As the aria continues, it goes. There's also a bit of phrasing there as well. There's up and down, and it's a very, very, very demanding aria. Probably one of the most demanding arias of a mezzo soprano because of the phrasing and the quickness of the opera. I mean, of the aria. So it's a difficult, very difficult aria to perform. And again, I've heard a lot of singers sing, and it's okay. It's very difficult to perform. But of course, Maria Callas, La Divina, she her voice was unbelievable. That anyway. So at this point, Basilio enters, another character who's the music teacher, and in the Marriage of Figaro, interesting enough, he's a tenor. Here, he's a bass. Why? Who knows? Nobody knows why that happened. And he sings the famous aria La Calunnia, the slander is a soft breeze, which means it picks up underneath and it just moves underneath. And before you know it, it just overwhelms everything. And if you think about it, if you listen to the music, how it starts, it just very gradually seems like it's just infiltrating from the bottom to go up. And in this case, I chose my grandfather to sing this because, again, this was one of his staple arias that he did in his career. This role and probably the Don Giovanni, the Mozart's Don Giovanni, were probably the two of his most famous roles. And this aria, of course, was probably one of his most famous arias that he also sang in recital many times. So let's just share a little bit of this. But again, you hear when it starts, it's just really soft, and it has a big crescendo because, again, the slander starts out slow and then picks itself up, and then it destroys whatever it comes in, for. So go ahead, Viviane.
S'introduce destramente e le teste di cervelli fa stordire, fa gonfiare. Dalla bocca fuori il sello.
So what's the plan now? I guess after all of the plan.
Yeah, well, again, you hear that it starts out slow, and eventually it just makes a big crescendo and a big boom in the final, few moments of the aria. But again, not because he's my grandfather, but I mean, just the artistry there is unbelievable. I mean, if anyone knows opera and you hear that, the fraseggio, the phrasing, the diction, the way he's interpreting it, it's just amazing. That's why he was considered probably the greatest bass of the 19th century, and maybe there'll ever be another bass like him with his talent and his devotion to the art of singing. So with this calunnia, the plan is, of course, is to destroy the counts, because Bartolo doesn't want the count to be, Rosina to be enamored with the count, because then Bartolo won't get the money by marrying Rosina. So it goes back and forth. Bartolo enters and starts to interrogate his pupil, meaning Lindoro Almaviva, and then he sings another famous aria called Dottor della mia sorte, meaning a doctor like me. Very, very fun aria. But again, it takes a good singer to sing it. And I have to say that in the last, 15, 20 years, to me, and again, not because he's a very, very good friend of mine, but a very, very, very good singer is Pittsburgh owns Kevin Glavine. And he sang this, I don't know how many times. They did it the last time I think they did the production here in Pittsburgh, the Barber of Seville. He was the Bartolo, and he did a wonderful job. And of course, he gives all the credit to my mother, but you still need to be a good singer in order to sing this aria. So let's just play a little bit of it. But it's a great aria. It's a long aria, so we're not going to listen to it all. But it's a very, very, again, the fraseggio, because Rossini was up like the king of fraseggio. It has to be well done.
Queste scuse, signorina, un dottor che non preoccupa queste scuse, signorina, vi consiglio, mia carina, un po' meglio in postura, meglio, vi consiglio, mia carina, con bell'impostura, meglio, 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 meglio. Vi consiglio mia carina, un po' meglio e postular, sì, sì. Vi consiglio mia carina, un po' meglio e postular. Ando tutte l'aria santa in questi scuse, signorina. Vi consiglio mia carina, un po' meglio in postular, un po' meglio in postular, un po' meglio in postular. Il confetto alla ragazza, il ricado sul tamburo, vi scoppaste e via, e via. Ci vuole altro, figlia mia, per potermi corbellar, altro, 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 altro. Ci vuole altro, figlia mia, per potermi corbellar, altro, 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 altro. Perché manca quel foglio? Lo sa per codesti imbroglio? Perché manca quel foglio? Sono inutili le sforzi, per mamma, non mi toccate, per mamma.
Okay.
So here, and you hear the fraseggio, and as the aria progresses, he even goes even faster with his words. So again, you have to have a command of your voice to sing this opera. Whoever, whether it's the tenor, whether it's the baritone, or whether it's the mezzo, you have to really have a command on how to breathe, because breathing is one of the most important parts of a good singer, because you have to have that appoggiatura, that you have to place your voice, and you can't force it. And Rossini is the type of composer that demands that of a singer. So after the aria, this aria is done, Barto tries to keep Rosina obedient, and he wants to keep her under his thumb. But Rosina, of course, is insubordinate, and she's not going to comply with what he's looking for. Then comes the end of first act, and this what we're going to listen to is probably one of the greatest sextets of opera that was written, and hopefully, maybe I don't know how long it is, but maybe we can try to play most of it, because it's really unbelievable. Because everybody, you have Rosina, Berta, Basile, they all come in. The Count is able finally to tell Rosina that his name is not Lindoro, but it is the Count. And she kind of still has no idea what's going on, but she's starting to realize what's happening. And Barto sees it and is again outwitted by his adversaries. So he calls in the soldiers to arrest Count Almaviva, or who he thinks is Lindoro. But of course, the police marshals tries to figure out what's going on. And as soon as he realizes that it's not a person named Lindoro, but it's the Count, he says, I can't do that. So he just says, that's it. I can't do it. So at this point, Almaviva is, winning the I guess, if you want to call it, the courtship for Rosina. But again, this is called fredda immobile come una statua, meaning cold and immobile, just like a statue. And it's truly, if it's done well, because again, a very demanding piece, because there's 6 people singing on the stage, and the choreography has to be done well and everything. If it's done well, it's an incredible ending to an act. And what we're going to see is probably a production, I would think, about 8-9 years ago from the Metropolitan Opera. So go ahead, Vivian.
Il mio
Okay. So again, an incredible piece of music. It really is. And if for those of you who have never heard it, you should listen to it. If you plan to go to the opera, because it's beforehand. Because it's a really incredible piece of music. The music, the crescendos, and it's difficult because in a sextet everybody sings at the same time, but everybody has different notes that they're singing, and they're singing in different ways. So it's not a blend. I mean, it sounds like a blend, but it really isn't. So, I mean, again, there's not that many sextets in opera. The only other one that I know that's famous is from Lucia de Lammermoor. That's the other very famous sextet. Otherwise, there's trios, there's quartets, but very few sextets, because it's only not easy to compose, but it's also difficult to sing. But that is probably, it usually brings down the house. If it's well done, and unfortunately I've seen it done not well sometimes, but if it's well done, it really is a great piece of music. And then this, what you just saw now, and I was talking about before, the tenor in this case was the one Diego Flores, the tenor that I mentioned before, who's a very, very good in this role and in playing the Count. So, and that concludes the act. That the act comes down, the scene is done, and that's it. And then there's a long intermission. Well, I don't know how long. The Met usually gives you 35 minutes of intermission. Pittsburgh here, they'll probably be a little bit less, maybe 20 minutes of intermission. The second act of the opera is not as grand as far as music is concerned. It's not as, there's not all of everything. The famous arias and duets and sextets and so forth come in the first act. So the second act, there's not as much happening as far as the beautiful music. It's more, going back and forth. But the arias, there is arias, but they're not as famous and as well known as the first act. And again, the act starts with Almaviva coming in, the Count. This time he's not disguised as Lindoro, but he's Don Alonso, the substitute for Basilio's the music teacher, because they say Basilio's not feeling well, so I'm here. But again, he comes in to gain Bartolo's trust, and he shows him a note from Messina and tells him that Lindora is Almaviva's servant. Then he offers to talk to the girl during the singing lesson and convinces her of the Count's dishonorable intentions. And Bartolo takes the bait. He says, oh, okay. Rosina enters and immediately recognizes Almaviva, that he's not, Don Alonso, but is really the Count at this point. And then she sings Contro un cuor che accendere amore, love towards Lindoro. She gives him his love. And then Bartolo sings Quando mi sei vicina, amabile Rosina. So, look, love towards Rosina. Finally, as this is all going on, Figaro comes back into the scene, and he then shaves Bartolo, which is a very funny scene if it's done well, because he puts shaving cream all over his face, and Bartolo is kind of sitting there. He really doesn't know what's going on. Bartolo being what it is Bartolo being an older gentleman. He's kind of confused. His head starts spinning, and they try to make all these things going on, and he kind of just says he doesn't know what's going on at the end. So, and then with the series of moves, the three friends manage to steal the key that opens the window bars of the balcony. Then, to everybody's surprise, Don Basilio suddenly shows up. Oh, well, he thought he was sick. That's why Don Alonso was there. He enters for Rossini's singing lesson, and that's not a good thing. So they try to come up with something to explain Basilio's sudden disappearance. Rossini resolves this with a beautiful ensemble with Figaro, the Count, and Rosina try to convince Basilio that he's sick and he has scarlet fever, of all things. They send him away with another sweet ensemble, Buonasera, mio signore, good night, my dear, which is, this is one of the better known pieces in the second act. So we'll play that now.
Don Basilio,
Cosa vengo qua l'intoppo? Come qua? Servitor di tutti quanti. Che vuol dir tallo vita?
di noi che mai sarà?
Di franchezza ci vorrà. Di franchezza ci vorrà. Don Basilio, come state? Come sto? Perché s'aspetta questa barba benedetta? La facciamo sì o no? Questa barba la facciamo sì o no? Ora vengo. Ehi, il curiale.
Io gli ho narrato che già tutto è combinato. Non è vero?
Sì, tutti io so. A Don Bartolo spiegate.
Ehi, dottore, una parola. Don Basilio, son da voi. Ascoltate un poco qua. Son da voi. Ascoltate un poco qua. Fate un po' che vada via, che ci scopra un gran timore.
Io mi sento il cor tremare.
Non vi state a disperare.
Della lettera, signore, e l'affare ancor non sa.
Ma qui certo il mio pasticcio non s'arriva a indovinar.
Che ci scopra un gran timore, e l'affare ancor non sa.
Intendete, mio signore, or lo mando via di qua. Intendete, mio signore, or lo mando via di qua.
Con la febbre, Don Basilio, chi vi insegna con la febbre a passeggiare?
Okay.
E che vi pare?
Okay.
So again, you see that how that is all integrated. They're all singing on their own, but they're all singing for the same cause. So that's again a Rossinian trait. You'll see that the tenor goes off the side singing, but he's really singing about something that's happening in the scene. And again, it's a marvelous scene when he's trying to shave him. He's trying to get a message to Rossini. Almaviva is while Bartolo is being shaved. And then he says, well, midnight will come for you. But Bartolo hears this as Figaro is trying to shave him. And he says, this is not a good, this is a trick. And you're somebody's disguised as something. So he kind of Bartolo starts figuring out what's going on. And so he throws them out of the house. So again, the plan does not really succeed just yet. And so Bartolo then realizes that Almaviva, Lindoro, Don Alonso, however you want to call him at this point, is trying to take away Rosina. So then he calls Basilio and says, hey, Basilio, you're going to marry us right away. And because I don't want, I don't want anyone to take her away from me. So at this point, there's a very interesting thing that Rossini did. He has a short orchestra piece that illustrates a passing storm.
Mm-hmm.
So we hear that. We'll hear this now, and if you listen to the music, it really sounds like a storm is brewing or coming. It's very well orchestrated, and it really perceives a storm. Again, if you hear that, you hear the thunderstorm. It kind of starts off in the distance and then really, again, crescendo, Mr. Crescendo Rossini, really blasts like thunder and lightning. Now, again, this is very interesting because I don't recall many operas that have that interlude like that. I mean, you have Traviata, which you have interludes, but those are the beginning of the act, never in the middle of an act like that. So that's an interesting concept that Rossini put into this. Into the opera. As we draw closer to the end, Figaro and Almaviva come in to the balcony with the key they stole during the shaving scene. They're looking around. They try to leave with Rosina when they have her, but they discover that the ladder that they used to get up to the balcony has been removed by Dr. Bartolo. And at this point, Basilio comes in with the notary. Figaro seizes the moment and tells him to marry his nephew with his nephew's fiancée. So when Bartolo arrives with the constables to arrest him, the game is over because Almaviva can now reveal his true identity. He's already married Rosina and has paid off Basilio. Because again, as we remember at the beginning of the opera, we said that Basilio will do whatever you want as long as you give him the money. So in this case, he says, okay, forget Bartolo, I'll marry the Count with Rosina. So everybody is kind of, happy except for Bartolo, who's defeated and doesn't, but at the same time, he's still content because the Count wrote off the dowry. So he's okay with that. And the end ends with a big Rossini-style finale, Amor e fede eterna, love and eternal trust. So Viviana, play a couple of minutes of that and then we'll conclude.
Absolutely. So in the meanwhile, while we're bringing the last piece together, let me just let the music talk. Well, while we're waiting for the last piece, obviously we're sitting on the finale, but I just wanted to give a shout out to the Pittsburgh Opera. At this point, the opera is going to open here on October the 14th. There are going to be performances on October the 14th, the 17th, the 20th, and the 22nd. We as Istituto Mondo Italiano will be attending the performance on Friday, October the 20th. But to any opera goers, especially those listening to this interview, when you purchase your tickets online, you can use the coupon code POIMI, IMI like Istituto Mondo Italiano, POIMI, to receive your tickets at 50% off. So let's give it one more try to the finale because now the suspense.
I don't think it works. For some reason, it's not functioning, unfortunately. So.
Okay.
Anyway. So again, I suggest anyone to go see the opera. It's an opera buffa, of course. And comic opera, it's very entertaining. There's a lot of action on the stage, a lot of good music, and a good singing, and it's just a fun opera, and it ends well, like most comic operas do. There's no tragedy in it, and so I highly recommend going to see it. I'm sure the Pittsburgh Opera will do a great job in performing it as they usually do with Maestro.
So we have a music director, Anthony Walker, and
Walker, yes,
Walker. Mm-hmm.
He's a very good conductor, and he'll do Rossini give Rossini much justice. So I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe we can reconvene in the spring when La Traviata is here, because that's another staple opera, another beautiful, fantastic opera. Maybe we can introduce the Pittsburgh opera crowd to that opera as well. Mm-hmm. So I thank you for hosting and for having me on, and I hope everybody enjoyed the evening with us.
Absolutely. I wanted to thank you again to take us into this exploratory journey of Il Barbiere di Seville, and as I said, also the collection of the clips that you have put together for us have enhanced our experience also by giving us, again, little tasting of the talent of many of the artists that you have chosen, including your grandfather, Maria Callas, and many others, and not to spoil the upcoming performance. That's why we decided to go this route, so that whoever is coming to the Pittsburgh performance is going to be a brand new experience. So once again, the opera is open on October the 14th with additional performances on the 17th, the 20th, and the 22nd. If you come in on the 20th, please come and say hello. During intermission, you can come upstairs. So we'll have a little private lounge where we can mingle and see one another or meet new fans of the opera and of the Italian Radio Hour. But unfortunately, our time together is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop. It's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomonditaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab. You can also subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcast. And again, I would like to profusely thank my dear friend Samuele Bozzolla and our sponsor Istituto Mondo Italiani. Until next time, alla prossima, ciao ciao, and we'll see you at the opera.